Hello and welcome to Leviathan News. Today is May 8th, and the big story is that Bitcoin maxis are big mad over the release of the BRC-20 token standard for Bitcoin, which allows anyone to go and create tokens on Bitcoin now. And now Bitcoin has sunk to the level of Ethereum, guys. There's shitcoins on Bitcoin, guys.
Shitcoins on Bitcoin.
Now, is Bitcoin maxis being mad really news?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But
no, that's Monday.
I understand that it's Monday, but there's some stuff to talk about here because
Yeah.
for the longest time, the argument from Bitcoiners was like, look at all these useless tokens being built on Ethereum. You know, Ethereum.
Well, Sam, before we talk commentary, let's talk about what's actually going on. So
go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So as far as my understanding, and this is a great chart. This is the one I've been looking at. So it sounds like about a month ago, which is like this kind of like mid to late April time, is when we first started hearing about ordinals, which is like using Taproot, you could inscribe metadata onto the blockchain, and that would, people could use that to like kind of create NFTs, right? Yeah. And then my understanding, and correct me if this is wrong, either you guys or you guys in chat, that like based on that, a BEP, which is Bitcoin Improvement Process, BIP-20 created the BIP-20 standard, which is now coins on Bitcoin. But like very strangely, because they're inscribed via this like data on Taproot, none of this stuff is enforced at all by consensus. And so it's just kind of like, in some respects, it's just like random blob data on the Bitcoin blockchain. And then in some respects, it's like real NFTs and coins and like just like regular bread and butter crypto tools that we've been seeing. So like that's my understanding of the situation. Is that your guys' understanding?
Yeah, pretty much. I think someone figured out how to put arbitrary data into a Bitcoin block, and this is like a secondary process where it doesn't really like sit in like not everybody has to pick this information up, right? You have to subscribe to this information, and once it's in there, it opens up a whole host of like things that you can do. You can do so much stuff now that you can put just a little bit of data into the Bitcoin blockchain through using Taproot. And what's crazy, yeah,
go ahead.
Oh, and what's crazy about this is that up until recently, up until like April or so, Taproot transactions only made up about like less than like 0.05% of all transactions on Bitcoin. Now, as of today, they make up over 50%. So the market has like vehemently said that they like these Taproot transactions and that block space or blob space or whatever you want to call it on Bitcoin is very valuable.
What's really wild about this is if you like are a student of history, 10 years ago, dollar coins existed on Bitcoin. There were things called colored coins. Essentially, you would just basically attach some metadata to Bitcoin UTXOs saying that this represents $1. And it got a little traction, but never super caught on. But something about like this current state of things 10 years later, maybe it's the fact that ERC-20 tokens are so successful on Ethereum. But now there is apparently a market for NFTs and this new standard. What's kind of wild though is like, if you want to have like ERC-20 tokens and NFTs, why not just use Ethereum? Like Ethereum is designed for it.
Yeah, I think.
Well, I hold on one second. Let me just address that. So, up until recently, the fee structure for Bitcoin was very cheap. I mean, honestly, you had like if you look at this chart, could you flip it to fee instead of count over there on the top right side, just so we can see. So coming into April, you could make like 1 sat per byte transactions on Bitcoin, and that is now gone. Like it is impossible to have that cheap of block space now because people just didn't know what they didn't understand the value of this blob space in Bitcoin.
Well,
But now that
or it
it's
didn't have value.
yeah, or it didn't have value, right? It was undervalued. Now that it has valued, and we know that we can inscribe or push data to the Bitcoin chain, now you have to value that blob space relative to everything else. So if the gas on Ethereum today is like 140, if the gas on Bitcoin even now is like 6 or 7 times cheaper than what Ethereum is, like, shouldn't you be putting information to Bitcoin instead of Ethereum? Or, like, how should we value this discrepancy in fee space when it comes to Bitcoin?
So first and foremost, I think we need to look at like this specific situation and this specific chart in the context of like Pepe. And like we just need to recognize that like this is not it's natural.
No, it
right?
is
But
natural. It is. People.
No, but I'm just saying that it is like reflecting a like sense of exuberance that is like just in the market right now. So I don't think that this, like, look at that chart, man. Like, that's crazy. Like, that's not sustainable. That can go up forever. All I'm saying is that I think that's a reflection of like this specific like couple weeks, and like it should normalize out. I think like bigger picture, I think so like Bitcoin maxis are upset for the reasons they're always upset, right? Like any move away from Bitcoin as just this like super pure simple thing is like a problem for them. But like a legitimate problem that they have with this is that because everything that's going on in these like tokens and NFTs is not like enforced or touched by consensus, and like even worse than that, because it's just this like kind of random data that's posted onto Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin itself is unaware of all this stuff that's happening, and in order for anyone to like to use it or to like not accidentally trade away their coins or like whatever, they need to run this like overlay software on top of it. And like that is just like a much more inherently risky and unstable and unsecure like system than building in like the rules of, all of this into consensus. And then the final thing I'll say is that while Bitcoin maxis can look at this and be like, oh my God, this is supposed to be internet of money, it's supposed to be equal, we're supposed to be able to like transfer it for cheap. Like the reality is, I'm sorry, Bitcoin maxis, but like this is a good thing for you, right? Like if people are not willing to pay fees to use Bitcoin, like Bitcoin is not going to last. Like every year it becomes like less sustainable just on an inflationary standpoint. And like you want people to want to pay to use the blockchain. And we can talk about like the implications of that, but just like
before this whole thing, the common argument from Bitcoiners was that nation states were going to start buying Bitcoin, and they would pay for the settlement. They would pay thousands of dollars to settle trillions of dollars worth of value, right? And that like, that at some point paying $1,000 per Bitcoin transaction would just become normal, right? Because that's how like all of this online money would settle. It'd be very expensive to do so. But in reality, we know now that people just want to create, random shit coins and some NFTs and, trade them around. That's where the fee market's going to come from.
At the end of the day, fees are super simple, right? It's supply and demand, right? And like, it doesn't really matter if it's like nation states, like doing repo transactions or like you and me trading like dick butts, right? Like, it doesn't matter. It just matters that like, there's a limited amount of space, and like there's more demand than supply, and their like price goes up. And like regardless of like your moral stance or your technical stance or like whatever you think about these Bitcoin coins on top of the Bitcoin protocol, like you have to look at this in terms of like long tail sustainability. And like I don't think the Bitcoin model make this whole like 21 million coins and like that being like that, like to me is like brainworms and doesn't make any sense to me. And so like at the same time that this is like pretty crazy that someone figured out a way to hack on like mediocre images onto the Bitcoin blockchain and like make it actually useful. It's just such a crazy story to me. And by the way, we didn't even talk about the real story, which is Binance halting withdrawals 2 times.
Oh yeah, that is a story actually. So over the weekend, Binance had to halt withdrawals twice because of that account that we showed you of transactions. Over the weekend, it peaked at 500,000 unconfirmed transactions waiting to be processed. And I will say that many of these transactions, and this was a complaint that I saw on Twitter, was that many of these transactions actually have less value than the fees that are being paid. So they may be paying like 140 sats for the actual fee, but the amount of value that's being processed is like 1 sat, right? Because that's all you need for an ordinal, right, to inscribe. And so there's a lot of, I guess, worrying now that bigger transactions are going to get stuck, or at least the fee market has to reset, right? Because everybody's trying to figure out what's the right fee to pay for one of these BTC transactions. And when you can only process so many transactions per second, this could be a sea shift in the tide changing, right? As you would say on Leviathan, of the fee market in Bitcoin changing for the long term, where it's never going to go back to this cheap fee market.
Yeah, so I don't consider myself a maximalist. Like, I prefer Ethereum, but I'm also like a big Bitcoin person. But what's interesting to me is that, like, for the longest time, I feel like Bitcoin had this speculative premium built in, which I sort of interpreted as like maybe one day Bitcoin's going to achieve the level of programmability that Ethereum's achieved. And that was kind of justifying its the evaluation an order of magnitude higher than Ethereum. But potentially, now that like Bitcoin's actually realizing it and it's going through some growing pains to do so, like, this could be good for Ethereum as people realize that Ethereum is just very well optimized for this kind of thing. Maybe Bitcoin even like forks one day into like a chain that doesn't allow for ordinals and BRC-20s.
Yeah, I actually, so this weekend I started a book. It's The Infinite Machine, and it's the first like history on Ethereum. And I haven't like read enough about it, but like fun facts for this group is that, did you guys know that Vitalik got started literally creating a magazine?
Yeah, he wrote for Bitcoin Magazine. Yeah.
No, and he created Bitcoin Magazine. He was writing for like something, it's called something. Anyway, point is, Leviathan News. Which one of us is a Vitalik?
Garrett, obviously.
Yeah. But I just like it's super interesting to go back to those early times pre-Ethereum and look at things like Colored Coins and Mastercoin and like the projects that were before we had these like general purpose blockchains about like adding more and more functionality into Bitcoin. And like, to Garrett's point, one, it's just interesting to see how history works and how we're back here. But two, it's I do think that this, like, the whole craze like really draws into question some of like Bitcoin's like core premises in the first place. And like if it's not about this like pure money and digital gold and 21 million, and it really starts to become like a true general purpose compute engine a la Ethereum, I mean, like, how does that change what Bitcoin is?
Well, it'll just go back to show that the block size wars of 2018 were focused on the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And that there has to be some happy medium where block space can be valuable, and then transactions can also be valuable as well too.
Yeah.
You can't. I don't think you can separate the two. And I think the narrative coming out of 2018, which is what the Bitcoin maximalists took up, probably is going to be looked back upon as the wrong one.
Yeah, and I hope that this causes people to not, basically take maximalist argument with a grain of salt, because maximalists are not representative of either Bitcoin or Ethereum, because clearly no one on Bitcoin who's actually using it cares about the purity of the block space.
Yeah, or they do, but that, like, just because they're the loudest doesn't mean that they're the community.
Yeah. But here's a question. What does MEV look like for Bitcoin now that we have, this like arbitrary information that's being pushed in, and it has value as well too? We're just going to start to see so the same issues that we had on Ethereum be brought up inside of Bitcoin now.
Actually, I would love to get someone actually smart on here. Well, you guys are actually smart about MEV, and just like understand, like, does MEV as a concept exist without like DEXs? And
they have DEXs on Bitcoin now.
Do we?
I believe so. Yeah.
I don't, man, this all changed in the last 2 weeks. I can't keep up. Okay, then that moots that question. But I do think there's like an interesting philosophical question about like what is the line of functionality where if you cross it over, MEV is like relevant, and before that, it's just transferring sats.
All right, open call to the community. If you know a Bitcoin maximalist or someone who's familiar with BRC-20 tokens, let's get them on Leviathan and talk about the news with them.
Aaron, I've got one more thing for you to bring up, Garrett. I just dropped in the chat. So over the weekend as well, a person by the name of Alexei Zamyatin released the BRC-21 standard to fully mint decentralized cross-chain tokens onto Bitcoin. This allows minting L1 assets like ETH, Sol, DOT, and decentralized stablecoins like DAI, LUSD onto Bitcoin and use them on the Lightning Network. Isn't that cool? Like, you know what's crazy is that the amount of development that's come out for Bitcoin just in the last like 3 months or 2 months or whenever the whole ordinal thing kicked off has been incredible. There's finally economic activity taking place. There's renewed vigor in people developing stuff, and it's just great to see. I honestly had written Bitcoin off as like, you know, it's ossified and never will be touched again, but we're seeing a literal spring come to Bitcoin for developers.
Yeah,
Hear, hear.
It really is interesting because of like, I would just like love so much to like have like Michael Saylor or somebody who's like really invested like their like identity in like Bitcoin is valuable because it's so pure, and just like understand how they interpret what's happening right now.
Saylor, come join us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Open call.
Open call, yeah, please.
We're willing to lend our platform to you, Mr. Michael Saylor.
Yeah. Well, the market is always right. You know, whether you like it or not, the market is always right. The market is saying that Bitcoin block space is valuable in the story. And so the market, like our participants, are going to have to shift their tone and narratives. I think the market will is kind of riding the ship now, right? Quickly, actually. And that the narrative is going to take some time. And then once people see that, oh, hey, there's a healthy fee market, and you know, we solve the issues around like long-term sustainability, I think people will come around then.
Yeah, I mean, eyes on Bitcoin.
Exactly. Coming back to Ethereum, it only took 25 days for the ETH validator queue to be fully cleared. It was just the craziest thing. I thought it was going to be months and months of people wanting to unstake and fully withdraw their ETH that has been locked up for years and years, but it's done. We got down to 0 pretty much over the weekend. And the cool thing about it is that now that we cleared everything, there's almost 1 million ETH in the activation queue waiting to be staked. It's like awesome. Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us were looking at Shanghai and Capella as like really a de-risking moment and not a like catalyst moment. Like for me personally, as a home staker, I had been like sitting on a good amount of ETH waiting to deploy it until I knew that I could get it back out. And I think that like the most skittish people that really like would have been the rush to the withdrawal queue, like if you weren't just like fully bought into this, you probably never directly put ETH onto the beacon chain yourself. You were probably the people that got Lido up to like a 40% market share or whatever. And so I think obviously much easier to say with hindsight, but I just think that it kind of turns out that yeah, like people who were in this game knew what they were doing, and like all that Shanghai and Capella was like this moment where we said like the merge is over and like it works as advertised.
Yeah, it was great to see, and I think that it really was, like you said, a de-risking event.
And the other thing, just oh no, okay, I was wrong on this. I was just pulling up ETH price, and again, reading this like book, The Infinite Machine, something that like struck me was like the pop off top of the 2018 bull run. Like the prices were roughly where we're at today. Now, of course, that was like the peak, right, of 2018, and then there was a huge trough. And I was just like wondering if maybe like the price hasn't changed that much, but when the Beacon chain launched, ETH was like less than $150. So
yeah,
that wasn't
it. Yeah. So just there's a bunch of other like macro stuff that's happening. The DOJ is investigating Binance over whether they facilitated sanctions violations against Russians. Coinbase is expanding into the UAE, and Ripple also said that their SEC lawsuit is going to cost them $200 million. That's all kind of on the side. The biggest thing is all this Bitcoin stuff. Honestly, like it's all over my feed. It's the only thing that I see people talking about, other than maybe Pepe. But I think the Pepe thing is kind of peaked, and now we're into Bitcoin season again. It'd be crazy if like the next kind of wave that we get is from like Bitcoin leading with all this BRC-20 ordinals. Who knows what's going to happen? But I think a good place to end it on will be a tweet that was sent out by Yudi Weimereither over the weekend. And I thought this one was really interesting, right? It kind of goes that there's almost a reformation happening in Bitcoin at the current moment, where because the ossification after 2018, there had just not been a lot of like free and open thought, and now with this ordinals and with the BRC-20, we finally get a lot of Bitcoiners who are finally excited again to be building on Bitcoin. And Yudi left, I think, this very insightful comment that says like he doesn't care what Satoshi wanted Bitcoin to be. The guy left after a year working on the project, never to be seen again, right? If that happened in the Ethereum space, like dev just leaves, goes away, and everybody else picks up the project, we'd hate them. We'd hate that guy, right? Fucking rug pulled us.
Yeah, pull.
Rug pulled, ran away, just left us with this thing to come and build, right?
He hasn't dumped his Genesis block though.
No, he's probably dead. I mean, like at this point, like who knows?
He's a boomer.
Yeah. But Yudi says, like, who cares what Satoshi meant for Bitcoin to become? He's not here. We are.
Yeah. And, I am just like, so I can't stop thinking about the fork wars and like the block size wars and like how that turned out. And like, it wouldn't really surprise me to see that happening again here, where like the result of this like new activity is like another kind of like war between like a more progressive community and like a more conservative community in Bitcoin. And like, let's just take all that assumption as like the truth. My question for you guys is like, what do you think will be like, I'm a true believer that when a chain forks, like one becomes the canonical one, just in terms of like where people choose to like put their actual value. And so my question to like walk us out on is like, what do you guys think would become the more canonical Bitcoin blockchain, the one with more functionality or the more pure one?
So I think I think like Bitcoin is this, right? It's whatever's listed by Coinbase or, OKX or anything. Like it's I don't think we can fork anymore at this point. Like you can't have a hard fork out of Bitcoin.
Why not?
Bitcoin, I think, could still hard fork. Ethereum can't easily hard fork because it's got too many ERC-20s dollar coins on it. So one chain would have to be canonical. Bitcoin, in theory, still could, and it'd be interesting to see. You brought up some books. I think this is Hegelian dialectics. I think we're seeing the synthesis of kind of the newer progressive Ethereum finding its way onto Bitcoin. It's going to be a bit of a messy battle, but I actually think that ultimately it's going to resemble something more like Ethereum than something more like Bitcoin.
But what if this like, all this functionality has been in there for a long time? Like Taproot's been active since 2021.
Yeah, you could just basically what could happen is like if a large enough part of the community, like let's say 25%, is like, fuck all this noise that like this new like stuff is created. Like we want to, in the code of the Bitcoin client, make it so Taproot like can only accept like, let's say, 10 bytes that are like can't, and like that would basically put a kibosh on everything that's happening here. And then, you know, they would launch that client, and then the people that chose to run that client would now, and then it would be like the exchanges choose like which Bitcoin as like the canonical one. And that's what happened with Bitcoin Cash. That's literally what happened with the merge.
Yeah.
And, you know, Ethereum Classic, or no, wait, what was it?
Yeah, Ethereum Classic. But what I would say to that is that this new chain, this pure chain that you're talking about, the fee structure on there would be very low.
Yeah, it would go back to the
it would go back to being
yeah.
one sat per byte. And so like the miners would obviously be making less money. They'd be incentivized to go where the money is, which is into the Taproot chain that is
well, yeah, you draw like, so that the core question of this is like, is Bitcoin maximalism really about like the ideology, or is it just like capitalist and economic at the end of the day?
No, I think it is ideology. I just don't think that, like, you know, ideologies cannot in a pure and open market, which is what Bitcoin is, right? Because of how the code has been designed. You can't have ideologies. I mean, you can think whatever you want to about. Oh yeah, nice curve. You can think whatever. Right now. It's us right now. So you can think whatever you want to about how Bitcoin is supposed to work. It's that market forces at the end of the day are the thing that's going to drive it. And essentially,
no. My question is, what are the market forces going to choose? Are they going to? Because again, like this happened before multiple times.
Yeah,
they chose Ethereum rather than Mastercoin, right? Mastercoin was this functionality built on top of Bitcoin.
Well, I guess I would frame the question a little bit differently. Is I would say that in light of all the alt L1 chains that we had in the past 2 to 3 years, right, where you had a bunch of different types of consensus, all trying to do the same thing that Ethereum is doing. Now that Bitcoin is essentially like another alt L1 in what it's providing in blob space, like where does it sit? Like what is it supposed to be?
Yeah, exactly. Because like if I was a Bitcoiner, like a true Bitcoiner, right now I'd be like, we're gonna get fucking murdered if we try to compete with Ethereum. We should not try to compete with Ethereum.
But at the same time, you have to, because your fee structure is with just transactions just doesn't work. People just don't pay for that.
Yeah. Well, God, I can't even believe I'm defending Bitcoin maximalism right now. But then you could get into this whole thing where it's like, well, the nation states, once they own enough Bitcoin,
it's never gonna happen. No,
I agree. I very much agree. I'm just like, this isn't our argument. You know, I don't even know why we're having it. It is. I don't think you'll disagree with me at all. Like Michael Saylor and like the people born out of his ilk, like very much believe that why Bitcoin's beautiful is because it doesn't have functionality and therefore like can't get like screwed around with, and the government won't go after it. And like adding this stuff is like ruining Bitcoin in like certain like ways of understanding what Bitcoin is. Look, even Wen agrees.
But I don't. But like we said, this is a secondary layer that sits on top of Bitcoin. You don't have to support it. Like you could be a Bitcoin exchange and say we just don't care about this.
But if I'm like Binance, I'm a Bitcoin exchange, and now this like crap that I don't even support just like completely ruined this coin for me.
Why would it ruin? No.
Binance I had to halt withdrawals 2 times.
Binance is super happy because one, they get a bunch more stuff that gets listed. So all these BRC-20s are gonna get listed on Binance.
Yeah,
and that creates more trading volume. And the only thing that the exchanges care about is volume. And so if it increases volume, that's great.
No, I'm not talking about exchanges. What I'm referring to is what you said is that like if you don't want to opt into ordinals, like you don't have to. And what I'm saying is that's not true. That is totally not true.
No, you just don't run that client.
Right, but you still have to pay these like exorbitant fees to move your sats.
Yeah, but you're gonna pay the fees anyway. Like fees have to be high for the network to have long-term sustainable.
No, I agree. That's why I'm an Ethereum maxi. Like I totally agree, but that's not the opinion of Bitcoiners.
Well, they just need to. I mean, look, I think in 6 months or a year, like once because the miners are going to be happy about this, right? The only parties who are unhappy about this are the fucking hodlers who just don't care and just don't even use the network, right? Just like put their stuff in cold storage and be like, you know, somebody's going to buy my bags in 30 years.
But those might be the only people that care about Bitcoin, right? Like everybody else.
No, they don't. No, why? No. You can care about Bitcoin and say that Taproot is great, because look, the arbitrary blob space of using it for NFTs and creating shitcoins is literally the first step. Everything that happens after that is just like there's going to be a Cambrian explosion of new app functionality, like
so I think
ZK
that's
stuff.
I think that's wrong because Bitcoin consensus, it's not Turing complete. It does not have the power that Ethereum has.
I understand, but the ability to inject arbitrary data at some level using Taproot is going to unlock a huge amount of things that were not possible beforehand.
Sure.
And so it just creates a bunch of new avenues for developers to come in and build that weren't there before. Because if you wanted to build an app or you wanted to build something, there's a lot of like Bitcoiners who came to Ethereum because they couldn't just build on Bitcoin. But maybe now they have that ability to do so where they don't have to go to Ethereum. They don't have to go to Arbitrum or wherever, and they can go and build on Bitcoin instead.
Yeah, I'm not even sure what we're arguing right now. I'm just saying that there's a maxi community that thinks all this is bad, right? Like that's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Well, I think this is the common mistake that people like latch into is they try to put morality into this code, and it's just code at the end of the day. And when you try to slap on like ideological or moral terms into this, it just doesn't make sense because you're talking about like ones and zeros, and it doesn't mean anything. It's just code, and it has a price that people pay to send transactions back and forth and buy unspent transactions. That's it.
Yeah.
We've
already gone too long.
Keep the argument going. Let's say that Satoshi just came out and endorsed Donald Trump. Let's go. Let's fight.
I mean, great. I don't give a shit. I think
Donald
Trump is just as much of an idiot as Joe Biden is just as much of an idiot. Like they're all, like literally the thing that is like least relevant.
No, you took the bait.
President.
You actually took the bait.
Yeah, I know. God damn it.
You know what? My pick is, rest his soul would be John McAfee for 2024, but we're not going to get there. The Fed's off him because he had too good of a chance to win the presidential election. And I think that'll probably
McAfee, come on the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to wrap it up then. This is a resounding success, I believe, for Bitcoin with the launch of ordinals in BRC-20. Congratulations to the community. You guys are making waves and you guys are relevant again.
Everybody, thank you. We just passed 1,000 followers on Twitter, which is actually our worst medium. It's the slowest. Everything gets delayed there because it's posted manually. So if you're one of the 1,000 followers, follow us on Telegram.
Yeah, and thank you for tuning in last week. We hit all-time highs with the Michael episode. That was great.
And open invitation. If anybody wants to come talk about news that they're making, this is your platform.
Yeah, tomorrow should be llama nodes we talked about last week. So exciting.
Well, until the tide returns, this is Leviathan News. Today is May 8th, and we will see you tomorrow.
And Satoshi will be our first guest after Wencast.
Yes, exactly. Win, please come on.